Hey guys, it's Jeremy here on Metal Music Meltdown, back with another video. We have for today, guys, my next episode of my top 20 albums of each subgenre. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Definitely check out my playlist. The first episode I tackled thrash metal, my all-time favorite subgenre, and then from there I went over to death metal. And I figured the next one I wanted to do was progressive metal. One of my favorite, not overly one of my favorite subgenres, but coincidentally a lot of my favorite bands in metal in general have a lot of progressive elements or are considered partially progressive metal bands. So it kind of works out that there's a lot of albums I could put in here with no problems. A lot of these bands aren't straight up progressive metal. A lot of them have elements of death metal, technical death metal, thrash, all different things. But they do have a lot of elements of progressive metal in these albums, and enough to, in my opinion, to be considered, progressive death metal or progressive blah 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 whatever. So let's jump right in, guys. We've got 20 albums to go through here quickly. At number 20, I went with the debut album from Cynic called Focus. Really good progressive technical death metal band. This band came to my mind right away when I was putting this list together, and Focus has always been my favorite album by them. Just so brutal and technical playing, but a lot of odd time signatures and maintain that kind of progressive elements to make my list. At number 19, I went with the second studio album, Unquestionable Presence from Atheist. Again, another really good technical progressive death metal band. A lot of jazz fusion in this one too. Really good odd time signatures, and just some really intense playing, and just really technical playing as well on this one. I'm not the biggest Atheist fan overall, but I always dig this album. It's always been a strong one for me, and it's the only one of theirs I really go back to quite a bit. At number 18, I went with the debut album from Canadian progressive metal band Kezia from Protest the Hero. Good old Canadian boys doing it right. The boys dug this band. They had a different infusion of progressive metal with like kind of skate punk and post-hardcore. Really cool sound, but a lot of progressive elements. And I have most of their discography, but I think the debut is the most progressive of all of them in my opinion, and the one most fitting for this list. And it's a concept album as well, on top of that. Next we got, on number 17, I have the ninth studio album from Catatonia, The Dead End Kings. Probably my favorite album from this group, and a lot of progressive elements, a lot of gothic elements in it as well, perfect blend of the two. And I just love this album. The songs are really eerie and haunting, but very progressive and kind of forward and modern at the same time. Love this album. If you're not familiar with Catatonia, please check them out. They're the masters of like atmospheric, kind of depressive, progressive metal, really good stuff. And the next one we got here at number 16, I have Operation Mindcrime from Queensryche. A lot of people might be surprised it's this low on my list. A lot of people probably have it in the top 3 or 4. But to be honest, I'm not the biggest Queensryche fan, and even this album, there's things about it I really like. It's a masterpiece in a lot of ways, because it is definitely a pioneer in the whole concept album realm, and as well as progressive elements. It's a masterpiece, but at the same time, it's a little too theatrical for my taste. That's why it's a little bit lower on my list. It's not one I go back to as much. And yeah, I just had to make my list because it just gets such a iconic progressive metal album that I do enjoy, but I'm just not the biggest Queensryche fan overall. I do prefer some of their other albums overall more, but this album is just so iconic and so important in the progressive metal subgenre that I had to add it in for sure. At number 15, I went with the mighty Enslaved with Utgard, one of their newer releases, 15 studio album. Love Enslaved. At the beginning, they were more kind of black metal, and then they really infused more progressive elements later on in their career. And their last like 3 or 4 albums have all been 10 out of 10s. They're on a crazy good streak of putting out just amazing albums. And I went with Utgard just because it had a good blend of like progressive black metal, but some folk elements in there as well. A little bit of melody mixed in as well. Just a good blend of all different styles, but definitely maintaining a lot of progressive elements that made it suitable for this category. And the next one we got here is from Gojira, number 14, with Mars to Sirius. Again, another concept album, really strong album from Gojira. Really good technical death, progressive metal, groove metal as well. They're kind of hard to put into a category, but they have enough progressive metal elements, in my opinion, to kind of put them in this category as well. And from Mars to Sirius, in my opinion, is probably one of their most progressive albums in their discography, and I always loved it. It's really good album. Yeah, 13. We have Evergray with The Storm Within. Just a really good progressive kind of some traditional heavy metal elements in there. Some power metal elements in there, some soaring vocals. Always loved Evergray, really cool band, really rockin' music. They do have quite a few progressive elements in their music, but not quite as much as some of the other ones. They're kind of more teetering on power, traditional metal with some progressive elements kind of blended in. But always loved this band. I wanted to include one of their albums and decided to go with The Storm Within. It's one that always grabbed me and one I always go back to quite a bit. At number 12, I went with the final studio album from Death, The Sound of Perseverance. This is kind of the direction Death was going in before Chuck passed. Definitely a more progressive death metal path, and more melodic as well. He was straight up death metal early on, and then he was kind of going more into the melodic death metal passages and a lot more progressive metal elements in his later albums. And if he was to go forward, in my opinion, Death would have sounded a lot like Horrendous, which is a band I'm going to mention shortly again. But that's the path I think they would have gone on if they kind of stuck around. But this is definitely the most progressive album in their discography, and I love this album. It's really good. And next we got Mastodon with Leviathan, of course, the concept album about Moby Dick. This is one of the first ones that came to my mind. They're kind of a blend of progressive metal with sludge metal, a little bit of thrash elements in parts, still a little bit of heaviness, but really good progressive metal album. Love the concept, love the songwriting, love the musicianship. Had to make my list, just an all-time classic and a masterpiece. And next we got Tool with Lateralis. Again, when it comes to progressive metal, Tool's one of the bands that instantly comes to my mind. They have a lot of alternative and kind of straight up rock elements, but very distinct sound if you know Tool. I love this album though, with Schism and The Patient, The Grudge, like just a really good top to bottom, good songs, and probably my favorite album by the band. Next we got Opeth with Still Life. Opeth had to make my list. It's my favorite band. Great progressive death metal band, and Still Life is a perfect blend of that early Opeth brutality in the death metal scene, and then blending in some progressive elements as they made that transition into the next era of albums. And this was kind of the first one in that era, kind of putting them more into the progressive side of things. And then the next one I got here, number 8, I think it is. Another one by Mastodon, Blood Mountain. Probably my favorite album by the band overall, but in terms of the best progressive metal album by them, there's another one I put a little bit ahead of it. But I love this album, had to make my list. The Wolf Was Loose, Crystal Skull, Sleeping Giant, The Calling to Birchman, just top to bottom, it's just a killer album. Always been my favorite Mastodon album. It's heavy, it's got really rockin' riffs, really deep guitar riffs, but so many great progressive elements in it that really tell a story and keep the momentum of the album kind of pushing along. Just always love this album. Next one here, number 7, I believe. It's Devin Townson with Ocean Machine Biomech. Second studio album from his kind of solo material. And I love this album. Really beautiful passages. His vocals really shine in this album. Really good progressive elements and a lot of post metal, some alternative elements in here as well. But when I think of progressive metal, Devin Townsend's one that instantly comes to my mind. All his albums sound different. They're very unique and stand out from each other. But my standard from the band's always been Biomech, the Ocean Machine, and had to put it on the list. And the next one here at number 6 is the only album so far that's kind of crossed over into 2 my list. I had this on my death metal list as well. I went with Ontological Mysterium from Horrendous. I just fucking love this album so much. It's just a banger. Perfect blend of death metal, progressive metal. They have like mellow death metal elements in there, some thrash elements in there, some groove. Just a blend of all amazing different subgenres, but just enough progressive metal elements to kind of make it interesting. And I just fucking love this album. I discovered these guys more recently, and I fell in love with this album instantly. At number 5, I went with Werun with Veil of Imagination. If you like Opeth, you'll love this band. Really cool artwork on this one as well. I discovered this band like 4 or 5 years ago. Somebody kind of told me about them, or if it was one of those things where if you like Opeth, check out these bands, and this band came up and I checked it out, and it pretty much sounds like Opeth. Like they have a lot of death growls, but they have a lot of really cool progressive passages and like signature changes and time signature changes and different layers to the songs. Much like Opeth, they're like almost like an Opeth worship kind of band, but they have their own sound too. They're not exactly like Opeth, but if you love Opeth, you'll love this band as well. I still need to pick up this album on hard copy. Been hard to find for a decent price, but yeah, this had to make the top part of my list. It's a killer album. Like I said, if you love Opeth like I do, you'll love this band. Very similar sound. Next we got an all-time classic, the second album from Dream Theater, Images and Words. This is an all-time progressive metal masterpiece. Like it's a classic, and this is one of the few bands on my list that are really, I consider, kind of a straight up progressive metal band. And this has always been my favorite album by the band, probably their most iconic and classic. I'm not the biggest Dream Theater fan, but when it came to progressive metal list, this album had to be in the top 3 or 4, just because it's so iconic and such a killer album. At number 3, I went with the fourth studio album from Between the Buried and Me, called Colors. Another album that instantly came to my mind when I thought of progressive metal albums. Really good progressive metal mixed with metalcore, some harsh vocals, some cleans, good use of different instrumentation, very technical on the instrumentation as well, some death metal elements in there as well. But yeah, this had to make it the list. Easily by far my favorite Between the Buried and Me album. I'm not the biggest, again, Between the Buried and Me fan, but I think this is the only album from them I actually own a physical copy. But it's so iconic and amazing that I had to buy it, and top 3 on my list for sure, instantly. And number 2, I went with another album from Mastodon, third one on the list, called Crack the Sky. Easily their probably most iconic, and it's a masterpiece album. Really cool concept album, very spacey, very trippy, a lot of like space rock elements, some sludgy elements in there, and a ton of progressive odd time signatures, and just some really cool elements in this one. A lot of people mark this as their best album. It's a close number 2 for me. I prefer Blood Mountain overall as an album as a whole, but this one's got some great progressive elements, just some straight up heavy metal elements, some alternative stuff mixed in, some groove. But yeah, had to make the top 1 or 2. It's iconic and a masterpiece. And number 1, of course, guys, Opeth, Blackwater Park, All Day Long. My second favorite album of all time, but this is a masterpiece, progressive death metal at its best. The track listing is perfect. Leper Affinity, Bleak, Harvest, Drapery Falls. Come on, guys. Blackwater Park, the title track. Masterpiece of an album, was a no-brainer for me. Had to make number 1 for me. So let me know down below, guys, what your picks for progressive metal would be. I'm sure there's a lot I forgot or left off. And I tried to include as many albums as I could that had a lot of progressive elements. It's kind of tough to do nowadays because so many bands blend so many different subgenres together. But these are the ones I came up with that had enough progressive elements, in my opinion, to make the list. But a lot of these could also fit in a death metal list, or some could be groove metal or whatever. A lot of them are death metal elements, but enough progressive elements, in my opinion, to make the list. So thanks for watching, guys. Let me know down below what bands I missed or albums I might have missed, or maybe there's bands I've never even heard of that you want to suggest, I want to check out. So that's my list for this time, guys. And also let me know down below what subgenre I should try out next. I could either do maybe the new wave of British heavy metal would be a cool one to try, or just traditional metal in general, or I could do doom metal, I could do grunge, I could do new metal. Just let me know down below, guys, what you want me to check out or do next. And thanks for watching, guys. Keep it metal.